Both man and the animals and birds were vegetarian. They didn't eat each other.
Makes you wonder why God designed so many of these creatures to be carnivores, but whatever. Dr. John Baumgartner? He's ostensibly the founder of this idea of catastrophic plate tectonics.
I believe it had to involve God's intervention to cool that rock down.
I encountered a flaw in my model and filled the gap with God. I'm a good scientist.
And those dinosaurs that were able to survive would be hunted to extinction.
Okay. That's new. Hello lovely people, my name is Emma. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you are new. Did you know that the story of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood is a real, true, actual, live, real historical event that actually happened in real history? Okay, obviously that is not true, but there's a startling amount of people who believe that it is in 2024, and are still making films and documentaries about how it is a real thing, and that's why we're here today. Enough people still believe that to keep Answers in Genesis funded. What a world. This is the Ark and the Darkness. Today's pointer is a little molang with a banana because, of course, God designed the banana to fit perfectly into the human hand. Apologies for how I sound. I have lost my voice a little bit. I had an all-day rehearsal for The Wizard of Oz, and then I went to karaoke. Mistakes were made, you know? We power through. So this is apparently a production by Sevenfold Ministries and or Genesis Apologetics. According to IMDb Pro and their own website, the film company is called Genesis Apologetics. Sevenfold Films is referred to as the ministry behind the Genesis movies. They also did Genesis 3D, you know, the big... I was sort of the same as this, really. I guess if Hollywood can keep remaking stuff from the same IPs, then like Creationists can as well, it's fine. Just to kick off early with the drama, it appears like there was a copyright suit filed by Genesis Apologetics. No, by Genesis Movie LLC. It's very complicated. Genesis Movie LLC filed a copyright complaint against Sevenfold Films. The case was dismissed with prejudice, which means they can't refile, so I don't know exactly what's going on there. My guess would be that it's to do with the DVD and maybe digital sales, because Genesis Movie LLC seems to be specifically about distribution of DVDs and things like that. That would be my guess. I did contact the director-producer Ralph Streen, this lovely chap. I did contact him with some questions about the legal filing as well as other things and who was responsible for what financial makeup of the film, but he never replied to me. I was really nice as well. Like, I even slipped in that I used to work in film and TV as like a fellow filmmaker, but it didn't work. Let's just crack on.
As well as contributing to our Indiegogo campaign, where you can secure a copy of the director's cut version of the film.
Dude, there's a director's cut? I assumed Ralph more or less had free reign. I can't imagine the producers at this creationist ministry being like, Ralphie buddy, you gotta cut this scene out. Like, it's super weird. Also, this movie is already 2 hours long, but the director's cut has giants and climate change, which I presume is why the YouTube listing for this video has a Wikipedia climate change entry underneath it. It's only very gently hinted at that they're climate change deniers in this documentary. I guess in the director's cut they go more into that. Despite this being a documentary about a catastrophic global climate change, we open on this adorable little wolfie in a storm. I tried to print off a picture of it. It's so dark in every shot that this is what you got. You would not be able to tell what this is. This is just a black page with a bunch of lines through it, so I gave up on the wolf. I don't know why I was surprised that the CG is not that good. For a low-budget movie, it's not actually that bad. It's nothing like laughable, homemade Christian movies, but this shot in particular shows what I'm talking about. Like, the jump from CG plants to live-action footage is quite jarring and noticeable, but maybe it's not if you're not actually interested in VFX. I don't know. They have opted here for a smart technique, which is called Make It Dark. Can't tell the CG is bad if you can't see it. Our poor wolf friend gets stuck on this little sliver of land. As the raging waters chase up behind it, epic music in the background as we pan up to the Ark. Pan back down and the wolf is gone. Yeah, hello? I'd like to make a formal complaint. Yeah, I'm watching this movie and the dog dies. Within the first minute, yeah. Can I get some free counselling or... The opening credits are kinda dope. We have these cool, gory shots, like, look at this dead person, and then cities and ships all plunged beneath the waves in the Great Flood. The only drawback is that the music over the opening credits sucks. It starts all dark and gritty, and then goes, like, techno-electronic party style, like I'm expecting glow sticks. You know, it's really weird, it's not fitting. We launch in with our friend, Randall Price. I didn't know that until after I'd finished the film, because he doesn't get a credit yet. As far as you're concerned, at this point in the documentary, he is just a man who has appeared and started talking. Randall says that people don't believe in the book of Genesis because we are being misled by things like social media and movies like Noah. But mostly it's those pesky scientists and their evolution and geologic column. Never heard anyone talk about the geologic column more than a creationist. They love that shit. They love to hate that shit.
For many people, that's the only source they have for something they think is a biblical account.
Well, there is the Bible.
And they're not told that there are evidences of these things.
Because there is none. Are none? I've never heard anyone say evidences before, and I don't know what the correct response is. We jump cut mid-sentence, which is going to happen a lot, by the way, to the next speaker in the documentary. It also doesn't tell us who this is. Usually in a documentary with academic speakers, you would get a name card telling you who it is, like, the first time they talk, and then you can find out what their expertise is. Pretty sus not to include that. Luckily, I have the power of hindsight, so I can tell you that this is... Where the fuck is he? Charles Jackson. Anyway, Charles says that we don't believe because we're intimidated by people like Bill Nye and Brian Cox, people who host television shows. He also says that people don't believe in creationism because we don't want to look stupid.
It's almost inescapably plausible.
His smile is so funny here. He's like, I technically told the truth. It's almost definitely possible. Well, I'm convinced. We jump to a couple more guys explaining why we were tricked to believe in evolution, and also the age of the Earth. The only notable part is that this chap, Dr. Terry Mortensen, I was genuinely baffled trying to find a photo of Dr. Terry because in the documentary, he looks nothing like he looks in any photo I can find of him. Like, either his photos are all, like, 15 years old, or he has aged very unfortunately in recent years. Anyway, his hilarious theory is that people only believe that the Earth is millions of years old, or the origin of that belief is a conscious rejection of the flood narrative. Isn't that amazing? We decided to believe that the Earth is millions of years old because we didn't want to believe in the Great Flood of the Bible. There were naturalists in the 17th century that started estimating the Earth was older than, like 10,000 years. Like, of course, studies of the age of the Earth, the Sun, the solar system did not come from a rejection of a specific Bible narrative. They came, as with most of our accepted scientific theories, from developments across a wide array of scientific disciplines. Kind of a brilliantly ludicrous theory, though.
And it still, in large measure today, is ignored by most Christians. They just never think of it.
Why would Christians be sitting around thinking about the flood? Aren't there more important things to consider? Like who's going to get groceries? Tim! It's Tim Chaffey of Answers in Genesis, star of Eric Hoven's Night at the Creation Museum and Night at the Ark Encounter. You won't understand my deep love and appreciation for Tim unless you watch my videos on those two movies. They're very funny and very stupid. I recommend checking them out. I promise it's worth it just for Tim's acting prowess. Interesting thing, from what I've been able to find out, Tim does hold several master's degrees in Christian theology and history. He doesn't have any in the science fields, and he doesn't seem to have a doctorate. I only mention this because Answers in Genesis always refers to him as Dr. Tim Chaffey. Again, a little bit sus. Now we get a reminder that the Great Flood was in fact sent to punish evil by somebody you might recognise as the only woman on the board. It's Gabriella Haynes. Answers in Genesis' that ain't easy to say. Resident Answers in Genesis paleontologist. That's much easier. She is barely in this. Like, this is the only note I have for her in the entire documentary. Don't want to give the only token woman too much screen time, right? On the subject of the flood being a good thing to get rid of evil, Ralph, babe, I feel like you shouldn't have opened on a whimpering puppy. Like dying helplessly if you want to get across the message that the flood was a real good thing in the fight against evil. Today's video is sponsored by Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon make delicious high-protein cereal and treat bars. Magic Spoon fits a variety of diets. It's high-protein, sugar-free, great for carb-conscious diets. More importantly, it's really tasty and comes in a huge variety of flavors. Magic Spoon cereal contains 13 to 14 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs in every serving. Magic Spoon treats contain 11 to 12 grams of protein, 1 gram of sugar, and 1 to 2 grams of net carbs, which makes them a great snack for when you're on the go. I'm literally in the middle of a chocolatey peanut butter bar as we speak. For me, the cereal and the treats are just a really good protein top-up while I'm on the go and busy. Magic Spoon is tasty but also actually filling, which is really important for me. Use my code EmmaThorne or click the link in the description. Try Magic Spoon cereal or treats today and get $5 off. You can also find Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product they are backed with a 100% happiness guarantee, so if you don't like it for any reason, they will refund your money, no questions asked. So click the link in the description to go to magicspoon.com/EmmaThorne to get that $5 off. Thank you so much for listening and to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. The doc keeps doing this funky thing where it cuts from one person to another mid-sentence. It's kind of fun until like the 4th time, and then you're like, oh, they're gonna keep doing this forever. It's about judgment and sin. Yeah, man, cool, whatever.
The Bible clearly reveals that we are now approaching the time when the second global judgment will come.
Sure, Jan. That's Dr. John Sanford. He has a PhD in plant genetics. Side note, I got so confused trying to put together the board, because if you just look at the photos, how many of these dudes kinda look the same? If you filtered by older white guy with glasses and receding hairline, you'd get like at least 50% of the documentary participants. There's nothing wrong with that, but it did make it kind of hard to distinguish one of them from the other. Cardigan's coming off, we're getting serious and slightly warm.
What is at stake is heaven or hell.
Slap those fear tactics in early. I know it might seem contrary to all known scientific disciplines, but your immortal soul's on the line. So might as well believe just in case.
The Holy Bible, a book inspired and architected by God.
Well, so this is our narrator, Jaron Lewis. I swear this is like the only picture I could find of this guy. It's some sort of like Christian education flyer. It was the best I could do, really. Jaron has some ministry of his own, of course, because they all do. If you're a creationist apologist, you either work for Answers in Genesis or you have your own ministry. I don't know why those are the rules, but they are. Jaron, narrating, makes a couple of snarky little comments here about how the Bible is man's real history, dating back to its true origins. I'm thrown back to Kent Hovind sarcastically asking me if I'm related to a strawberry. Acting like something is dumb and getting all your peers to laugh derisively at the thing is way easier than actually, disproving it. The graphics here are pretty nice. Hoping we get some cute dinosaurs. Our guys go off on a little anti-evolution thing. We couldn't have come from soup or monkeys or whatever, you know the drill. We get a little rundown of the beginning, like the beginning, how God made the earth in 6 days and everything was sick. Sea monsters! Quick question to think about before it comes up formally later. If the sea creatures survived God's flood, that's the Answers in Genesis story, all the sea creatures didn't have to be brought onto the ark because they could survive. Forget the problems with that for now. What happened to the plesiosaurs? And the mosasaurs and the ichthyosaurs? And the ancient sharks and so on and so on? Where'd they go? Pterosaur, I think? Flying through the open firmament, according to Jaron. I put up a dinosaur picture just because I like that there are dinosaurs in this. Not gonna lie, it's kind of the best part. Definitely like 60-70% of the budget went into this opening section just to put cool dinosaurs in it. That could be a raptor, maybe a compy, not totally sure of the scale or the accuracy of the models used. But I love to see them. And these are like maybe brachiosaurs, brontosauruses, something like that. I don't know. This is definitely my favorite part. God made the world and it was awesome. Here's some dinosaurs to show you how awesome it was.
But there was another tree God had also placed in the garden that God commanded man not to eat from.
Which I still think is a dick move. God is a drama queen. Clearly he wanted to watch the chaos unfold. Why else would you make creatures with curiosity and free will and then plant a tree with the knowledge of good and evil, tell them about it, and then tell them they're not allowed to snack on the fruits? The fruit from this tree gives you important knowledge on right and wrong, and you can't have any. How did they know it was a sin to disobey that order before they had knowledge of good and evil? You'd have to ask whoever wrote that bit of story. It's never quite made sense to me. You know what comes next. Terrible sin and evil. But it's not all bad, because now our speakers start getting names. Randall Price gets his actual name tag here. Randall Price is an actual real doctor whose expertise is in biblical archaeology and Semitic languages. The next two speakers don't get name title cards. It's really random formatting. Like, I don't know why they've decided to assign names to speakers when they have. So you go quite a lot of the documentary without knowing who is speaking, which makes it really hard to take notes, by the way. These people, whoever they are, just talking about how great the world was before man sinned.
Both man and the animals and birds were vegetarian. They didn't eat each other. They ate the plants and the fruit of the plants.
Makes you wonder why God designed so many of these creatures to be carnivores, but whatever. This looks like maybe a dromaeosaurid to me. Either way, it definitely looks like a carnivore. Why did he make them with big chompy teeth and a killing claw if they were always meant to be vegetarian? Why did God make any creature with a body incapable of extracting proper nutrients from a vegetable diet? I guess he just thought their teeth designs looked cool and their stomachs? Or, if we accept this as design, this supports my hypothesis that God is a drama queen who intended everything to go wrong from the start. 10 points for me.
God is not the author of evil or death.
But I thought God was the author of everything. And if God didn't make those things, who did? He made humans capable of sin. He put the sin in front of them and said, have at it. And then punished them with evil and death. That would seem to imply he's the author of it to me.
Through one man, sin entered the world, and death through sin.
Oh no! Suddenly, Terry Mortensen, who looks nothing like this, gets his name card. Apparently his PhD is in History of Geology, which is not a subject title I've ever heard before. I actually emailed Coventry University to just kind of check on this, and I never heard back from them, so we'll just take it as read that he is a doctor of the history of geology.
The fall of man affected the whole creation. The ground was cursed, the whole creation.
Why? God was so annoyed that this one guy disobeyed him, despite the guy not knowing what right and wrong was at this point, that he punished all of the plants and animals that he had just made by making the world suck. Like, what's his fucking problem?
Even the creatures were suddenly carnivorous or poisonous. Diseases and viruses emerged that were otherwise benign.
Why though? This section about the world being really shit goes on for some time. The documentary makes the bold claim that evil had to mature before God could make the first judgment. That's why there's a bunch of time between the fall and the flood. But I'm sorry, what? All-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful God had to wait for things to get really bad to justify a cleanse? Do you know what you're saying right now? Men and dinosaurs coexisting. Tick that off your bingo card. Lots of dramatic CG here, animals turning carnivorous. This bit where some women are praying at a big flaming cauldron. I didn't really know what was happening there until I saw that they're actually sacrificing babies. Gotcha. As we know, being willing to sacrifice your child for a god would be a very evil and sinful thing to do.
Most flood geologists point out that the world, the Earth, had a more global, warm, mild climate. And the evolutionists believe that too.
Evolutionists? That's bingo for sure. Dr. Jackson finally gets his name card. I couldn't find out very much about him. One of the only things I found was a very short article by Eric Hovind that claimed he's a genius. I feel like the bar for genius is pretty low. Charles is one of the few guests with a vaguely appropriate scientific background. He has a master's and a PhD in science education and a master's in environmental biology, making him the most qualified speaker so far. He basically says that in the past we had a lusher, more forested Earth, which I guess means that Genesis is historical? I'm not really sure what point he's making here. Andrew Snelling pops in here. Again, slightly deceiving picture. Turns out his Answers in Genesis photo is, well, from quite some time ago, so he's aged a little bit since then. He just pops in with a brilliant tie to reiterate how much better the world was pre-flood. Fun fact about Andrew, he sued the Grand Canyon National Park Authority because they wouldn't grant him a license to collect rocks for his study. Eventually, the case was dropped because they allowed him a license, and now he may collect rocks as he pleases. What a kooky cast of characters. Tim, lovely Tim, gets his title card here. Dr. Tim? ? Citation needed. I'm still not sure on that one. He's just joining in to say that the pre-flood world was indeed better. They talk about how all people were corrupted with thoughts of violence and evil, except, of course, Noah and his family. They were all cool. For some reason. As we all know to be true historical fact, Noah lived till 1 billion years old.
Something happened at the time of the flood, and that's when this incredible degeneration of humanity happened. There was this incredible decline in longevity.
So it's God's fault for saving one small family and reducing the gene pool. That's got to be what that means, right? The inbreeding of Noah's family is why we don't live till 900 years old anymore?
When you plot the data, which is straight out of the Bible.
Yes, the data, which is straight out of the Bible. I don't know if that's the most reliable data. Now, this is a really interesting section which focuses on the shrinking ages. Shrinking ages? The lowering ages. Lifespans. The shrinking lifespans. Does that make sense? This section focuses on the shrinking lifespans of these patriarchal figures in the Hebrew Bible. Some creationist apologists argue that if you plot these ages on a graph, you get something perfectly in line with exponential decay. And they make the assumption that that means that the ages couldn't have been fabricated. I have a few problems with this. Problem number one, correlation doesn't equal causation. I don't know if that even technically makes sense in this context, but you know what I mean. They could be fabricated ages and plot nicely on a graph. Problem two, we're using one source of data to state historical fact. We don't have any extant evidence outside of the Bible that these figures really lived to these ages. We do have a mythological precedent for making things up about important figures in history. We're basically in the apologists' comfort circle of Bible proves Bible. Problem three, I told you I got a lot of problems. Problem three, we're making another assumption here about the ages of these patriarchs, representing the overall lifespan of human beings. Suppose one or more of these guys is a Spider's Georg, an outlier that should not be counted. The data could be massively skewed, and we would have no idea, because we just have these single figures that we're assuming represent the overall average lifespan of all people at that time. Problem four, lifespan is not as clear-cut as pure genes equals longer life. There are other factors that affect lifespan, which leads into my final problem, problem number five. Our average global lifespan in recent history does not match this data. It doesn't follow the graph. According to this fall, decay, Noah genes theory, we should all be living to about 8 years old now. Add to that the earlier data also does not fit this lovely curve. If it's about the purity of the genes, Adam should have kicked off the whole event by living for the longest, and it would have gone exponentially down from there. But it doesn't! This graft and concept in general seems to come from a Catholic research centre called the Colby Centre. I found a user called Irish Kev on the Debater Catholic subreddit from 3 years ago who plotted his own graphs with the data from Adam's generation, which I will show you now. You can see that the graph that the apologists are using are a really disingenuous use of the data just to make the graph, well, fit the theory. Manipulating data to fit the theory, I can't believe they would do such a thing. Suddenly our beautiful consistency is gone and we've got a lot of Spider's Georgs.
Would the men who recorded these ages through history really have conspired together to create data that follows an exponential decay curve?
No. Would apologists manipulate data to start at a specific point to make it more closely match a decay graph? You'd have to ask Dr. Charles.
The objections to Noah's flood are mostly ridicule. The only serious things are maybe trying to say, well, where did the water go? Where did the water come from? And then lampooning Noah's Ark.
Yeah, man, there's never been a serious scientific counter to the flood narrative. It's just people taking the piss. Are you Is it possible to be that self-deluded, or is man just lying? In comes Dr. Mark Horstmeyer, great name, hope I'm saying it right, to prove that the Ark is plausible. He has a piece of wood, so he can be trusted. He argues that the Ark as described in the Bible would be perfectly stable during great ocean flood waves.
Meaning it'll go all the way up to 90 degrees and it'll come back. It's stable.
But wait, wouldn't that...
Not that that wouldn't have caused problems for the people and the animals in the Ark if it had been tilted that much.
That's what I was going to ask. Mark has this little scale model of the Ark, which he put in his swimming pool and measured. He's an engineer and I've got no idea, so I'm just going to trust that his 200th scale model Ark could indeed withstand the waves he generated in his own swimming pool. And we'll just move on.
Most of biology didn't need to be on the Ark.
Oh good, we're back here. Yes, all the ocean species carried on as normal. If you've watched a lot of anti-science, creationist, fundamentalist content, we're about to hit a frequent word that may trigger you. There were about 1,400 kinds of animals on the Ark. I'm not a scientist, and this is a 2-hour movie that I need to get through, so I'm going to link a video by Gutsick Gibbon for you down below, explaining the problems with created kinds and that idea in young Earth creationism. Our guests argue that the kinds, the species of animal that were on the Ark, of those species, Noah chose all the little guys. So he wouldn't bring, quote, 2 Great Danes, 2 wolves. Noah took the littlest guys of each kind. And then somehow, over the last few thousand years, I don't know, pygmy elephants turned into really big elephants. I've never heard this particular part of this theory before, but I love it. The idea that it's all just like Chihuahua scale animals of each species.
Evolutionists often claim that it would not be possible to fit all of the species of life on Earth onto a ship the size of the Ark.
Evolutionists is not a word, I have lost my singing voice. And if it was a word, It would be a word that described most people with functioning logic and access to mainstream education. But yes, we do claim that. Here we enter a segment that can be reduced to, the Ark was really big though, guys! As if that makes the entire story plausible.
Sea creatures, insects, invertebrates, and plant species did not need to be included on the Ark.
What does this mean? They weren't needed. Because creationists believe that this is the period where loads of plant and animal life died out. So were the animals that Noah could easily get to just more important? Was God just trying to make the best out of a bad situation he had created?
You can further significantly reduce the number of animal kinds needed down to around roughly 1,400 kinds, or approximately 6,750 animals in total.
Say this is true. Let's entertain the notion for a second. Say evolution is bunk and there were under 7,000 animals on the Ark. Because kinds, whatever. Regardless, there were a total of 8 people on the Ark. How are 8 people feeding, caring for, and mucking out 6,750 animals? What are the animals eating? A lot of these animals would be inclined to eat each other. Not only do you have to prevent that somehow, but presumably you also need a bunch of other animals as feeding stock. Now, any of you who have pets or have ever watched a TV show or anything featuring an animal ever, you'll know that animals respond to stress in various ways. Usually with some kind of fight or flight response. I would imagine that for most creatures, being crammed into a little wooden boat, a wildly unsuitable environment for most of them, without their usual food and water sources, maybe being separated from their packs, being buffeted about by the roaring waves of the flood, they're gonna be pretty damn stressed. How did they not just stampede all over each other in a big bloody panic on day one? Say we're on the Ark for 370 days. There are 8 humans. 6,750 animals. If they split the work equally, that's still 844 animals to look after per person. Assuming they need 8 hours sleep, time to feed themselves, they work 16 hours a day, let's say. That's 5,920 hours to feed 6,750 animals. That's less than an hour for each animal over the full 370 days. Some of these animals are going to be lucky to be fed twice the entire time. And that's assuming that the people don't make any mistakes, don't get buffeted by a wave and spill food everywhere. They don't go to the wrong cage or the wrong part of the ship at some point. It's completely infeasible. How do they deal with the animals that have very specific dietary needs? How did they prevent the food from rotting? I'm assuming there wasn't a big refrigerator on board. Where was the food and water stored? What happened to the waste? 6,750 animals defecating on one ship with 8 people to muck them out. I don't think that's happening. The Ark would have been festering in grossness and weighed down by more literal shit than the Ark could handle in no time flat. They're probably all doing a nervous poo by the time they get there, like, let's be honest. There are animals whose feet wouldn't be suited to the wooden flooring. There are animals who would be gnawing on their surroundings. The lack of ventilation is an enormous problem, especially with the mounting piles of defecation. If we ended up with all of the species that we have today, or kinds, if you like, presumably there's going to also be parasites and things like that. How is illness not spreading across the entire ship immediately? Decrying evolution as false is only the first in a very long line of problems to overcome to assert that the story of Noah's Ark is any way plausible. It's preposterous. Oh, they were in horrible, horrible cages? Cool.
We have plenty of room left over for cages and infrastructure.
Plenty of room? I'm sorry, can we look at those cages again? You think an animal would survive to healthy reproductive adulthood after 370 days in that cage? With 8 humans trying to navigate, apparently, 1,400 cages to figure out who needs feeding? And you're saying this is not only reasonable, but more likely than evolution?
But as compelling as the science behind the Ark is, we must not forget that it is God who orchestrated the events.
I have never for a second forgotten that it was God who was responsible for saving those 8 people and committing a global genocide against literally everyone else, including babies, the elderly. Remember, the elderly were like 1,000 years old at this point, and all the animals and plants that didn't get a spot on the boat. Thank you, Jaren, for the reminder that in this book, God is a big bastard. There's a fun time-lapse of the Ark being built. There's no people in it. I guess it would have been awkward to figure out how to animate humans building the Ark in the time needed. So it just kind of comes together by itself. Just make it happen. It'll look cool graphic. We like it. Couldn't God have made them a boat? He's killing everything and everyone with a big flood. These are his, like, favorite people worthy of saving. And he's like, right, fellas, get to work.
People would deliberately ignore the evidence of the flood. Or as the Bible puts it, they would be willingly ignorant of the flood.
I would argue that ignorance is ignoring the science of multiple disciplines to make up your own insane rules about animal kind to justify a story that still otherwise doesn't have any plausibility. But you do you, Jaren. So we're back to the cyclical Bible thing again. The Bible says that in the future people won't believe the Bible because they're mean and stupid. Nobody writing the Bible had any agenda for making those claims. It's such a ridiculous argument. It's like, I believe the Bible is literally historically factual. Doesn't a lot of it contradict with known science and history and also itself? The Bible told me people wouldn't believe. It really is true.
God was perfectly capable of preserving Noah.
Well, yeah. But surely he was perfectly capable of doing that anyway. He's all-powerful. Realistically, he didn't even need a flood. It's ludicrous to have faith that this is true, but that God decided to make his only surviving humans build themselves a big ship, gather a bunch of animals and fresh food and water, just to bop about in a giant water world for a year. Why would he do that? For the lols?
Is it too difficult a thing for the God who created the universe and everything in it to preserve the life that he chooses?
No, if that God existed, it wouldn't be that difficult. But the way that God in that story chose to preserve Noah and the animals is impossible. So that's what we don't believe. Not that an all-powerful God couldn't have saved a chosen few, but that the Ark story is plausible. I would like to point out at this stage that they haven't actually provided any evidence yet. The best we've had so far is a few Bible scholars and one engineer saying that the story is not impossible. That's not evidence. It's also not correct.
Since we are indeed living near the end.
This is going to end up being my new catchphrase. We have been living in the end for 2,000 years. Please get over it. It can feel like that at the moment because of what's happening to the climate, but you fuckers don't even believe in climate change. This whole next part is just more Bible proves Bible. The Bible says that the whole world flooded. The depth of the flood and the length of time that it lasted, as stated in the Bible, means it would have to be a global flood. Okay, it's definitely a global flood myth because the Bible mentions it a bunch of times. This changes nothing for a skeptic. Dramatic building music as the first drops of rain start to fall and the flood begins. No! Dinosaur buddy! Water, water, water. Animals somehow peacefully snoozing in their cages. I love that they put a little skull and crossbones sign on this village, just to remind you that everyone on the planet but Noah and his gang are evil and deserve to die.
Have you looked at our caps recently? They've got skulls on them. Are we the baddies?
There's a couple of shots here of a dead T-Rex. What's up with that, dino hater? And we're back to the wolf from the start. Everything comes full circle. So we have to watch this puppy fail to survive the flood again.
And everything that is on the earth shall die.
One of the most prolifically told stories for children.
The unbelievers, like the secular geologists, believe Mars did have a flood.
Okay. It's a different planet, though, than what we live on. Captain Groovy Tie explains that the biggest questions about the flood, where did the water come from, where did the water go, where did the water come from, Cotton Eye Joe, can be explained by something called catastrophic plate tectonics. This is one of those situations where I'm not expert enough to be able to analyse this information in detail, and the only sources about catastrophic plate tectonics are creationist blogs and Answers in Genesis. So I'll do my best here, but you scientists out there, please give us the best that you got down below. Thank you. This particular variant of older white fundamentalist with glasses is Dr. John Baumgartner. He's ostensibly the founder of this idea of catastrophic plate tectonics. The hypothesis goes that during flood times, tectonic plates moved 1 billion times faster than they do currently. First, says Genesis and the documentary, the fountains of the deep break open. According to our creationist friends, that represents the Earth's mantle, the Earth's crust, breaking open. The crust sort of popped up, raising the sea level and causing catastrophic global rain. Then the crust cooled and shrank back down, and the extra water went away down deep ocean crevices.
Catastrophic plate tectonics is essentially the same idea as conventional plate tectonics, except that the timeline and events are all centered around the year of the flood.
So the key difference is that this idea is fit around the Bible narrative, instead of years of scientific study. Cool, 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 cool. The next section goes on to explain that Genesis's flood narrative actually describes the splitting of Pangaea into separate continents. It might as well. In for a penny, in for a pound, right?
How did a book thousands of years old, know exactly what was at the bottom of the ocean floor.
Call me overly cynical if you like. I feel like it's a bit of a stretch to say that the single phrase, fountains of the deep, describes exactly what's on the ocean floor. They knew exactly what was down there. Water! The Bible really is true.
These giant subterranean rifts broke open, spewing magma that created steam jets that shot up into the sky.
So this is the thing. Let us once again give our friends the benefit of the doubt and suppose that this is true, that this is really what happened. Catastrophic plate tectonics. The Earth's crust split open. Whoa. I was thinking about the tectonic plates moving really fast and I got unstable in my own body. The Earth's crust is split open, spewing forth magma. The tectonic plates are not just shifting, but dare I say, shimmying all across the Earth at rapid speeds. What would happen to the planet? Well, we're going to generate a substantial amount of heat, at the very least from the friction generated by the tectonic plates rubbing and bashing against each other, as well as the rapidly formed granite. Granite is an igneous rock, that means it forms when magma cools. What would that heat do? I mean, boil the oceans, probably? Melt the Earth's crust? Like, the heat would be substantial. It's the interaction of tectonic plates that forms mountains. If this happened at a rapid pace, we wouldn't have mountains, because they would have just melted. If the global flood really occurred in the only way that creationists describe as possible, sans just God did a miracle, which is honestly a more believable explanation, it would have caused global destruction. The concept of a little wooden boat with a few guys and animals on it surviving that? Bro, it's not just game over for humanity, it's game over for life on Earth, and more. If you're not convinced, I'd love to share a clip with you of Gardner himself doing a talk about catastrophic plate tectonics in which he admits that the only way his theory works is if you insert God doing a miracle into the cooling process.
Even some hydrothermal circulation when the rock is near the ridge will only cool the uppermost part of it. I believe it had to involve God's intervention to cool that rock down. I was part of a team called Radioisotopes in the Age of the Earth. We found evidence, radioisotope evidence, that there was a large amount of nuclear decay that occurred during the flood. And again, to alter nuclear decay rates requires the hand of God, as far as I know.
I encountered a flaw in my model and filled the gap with God. On a separate note, my peers and I discovered a physical impossibility in another study of ours, so that must have been God too. I'm a good scientist. The intellectual dishonesty and the self-delusion is just beyond my understanding here.
The Rocky Mountains also began to form.
No, they don't. They're gone.
The last of the dinosaurs are flooded, mixed together with sea life, and are buried in mud.
What an insane and convenient way of explaining dinosaur fossils in a young Earth. This inspires me to get back into writing fiction.
Trillions of fossils are left behind as incredible evidence of the worldwide catastrophic flood.
Jaren, you and I are going to have an argument about the word evidence.
What's under your feet? Hundreds of distinct horizontal layers. The only way that such a record could have come into existence is global scale processes producing the whole record in a single global event.
That is the biggest lie told in this documentary so far. The unspoken part of the sentence here is, if you believe in the young Earth. If you believe that erosion and tectonic plate movements settle sediment over millions of years, you have another, much better explanation. Behold Dr. Carl Werner, brackets, medical doctor. What a hilarious caveat. Dr. Carl goes off about, well, I'll let you guess. In this section about the geologic column and sedimentary layers. Shout your answer out now. If you said the Grand Canyon, give yourself a little pat on the back.
The Bible refutes evolution theory.
I'm gonna be a pedantic little shit for a second. It contradicts with the theory, it doesn't refute it because it doesn't mention it because the humans that wrote the book didn't know about it yet. Most rational Jews, Christians, Muslims argue that when God was speaking to those people who had no concept of these scientific theories and no basis for understanding them, he would have spoken to them in a way that made sense, which is why there's no mention of evolution in the Bible. I think that's a fine conclusion to come to. For those of us who are skeptics, it's rather indicative of the fact that human beings wrote these books with all of the knowledge and cultural references that they had available at the time. Anyway, I love the stupid graphic. Whale to bush to ark and so on.
If you see an animal die along the side of the road, like a possum or a deer, pretty soon that deer or that possum is gone.
No! Not this again. If you want to know more detail about things like the preservation of matter to form fossils, sedimentary layers, and the stupid arguments that creationists make about them, check out some of my science-minded skeptic buds on YouTube. There are so many videos debunking these just idiotic common sense arguments. I start to despair every time I hear an apologist mention the Grand Canyon, or how when animals die you can see them decay. So how is so many fossil exist? Checkmate, atheists. I just can't go over these things time and time again. TLDR. Because rapid burial in specific conditions is required for fossilization to occur, that process is impossible to believe in for a young Earth creationist. They cannot accept that so many fossils could be created in 6,000 years, and much less. If you accept the age of the Earth, it doesn't pose a problem, especially because it takes, on average, generally about 10,000 years for fossilization to happen. The reason these guys are always so incredulous about fossils, amongst other things, is because they think the Earth was formed 5 minutes ago, and the young Earth model is just so contradictory with all science.
Mary Schweitzer in the 1990s and the early 2000s.
No, not Mary. Leave Mary alone. If you've been around my channel for a while, you'll have heard me mention Mary Schweitzer before. She is an unconventional paleontologist in that she combines her work with microbiology, and most famously discovered what she believed to be traces of life in an ancient T-Rex fossil. Given this fact, and the fact that she's an evangelical Christian, the creationist community made huge leaps and make constant references to her work in espousing theories that she has never agreed with. I think Schweitzer has a pretty good approach to a controversial hypothesis about the preservation of life over these long periods of time. One of the downside of her oft-cited article on the subject is that there aren't substantial amounts of evidence, and she in fact said she would have rather held the paper back until she had more evidence. Unfortunately, it was really the only way for her to get more funding. Mary has received many menacing requests from the creationist community urging her to come forward with the truth and basically take their side. In short, Mary Schweitzer does not assert any anti-evolutionary theories, any young Earth theories, and her discoveries are an interesting possibility that have yet to be backed up by repeatable findings by other scientists. Part of the problem there is her unique specialization. And so what pisses me off every time her name is used to assert some creationist bullshit, what you really have here is a Christian scientist who lets the research guide her and expand her faith, rather than letting her faith restrict her findings. Basically, she's the exact opposite of these people, and they continue to use her name to peddle their nonsense. It's so unfair. Side note, he hasn't really said anything unique or interesting that I thought was worth mentioning, but this guy is Andrew Fabich, and he's in a theatre for his interviews, for some reason.
The state the bones are found in all show evidence of flood burial.
Because rapid burial by sediment is how fossils are typically formed. Again, this only requires a giant flood if you believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. And as we discussed earlier, the Earth would have been so hot and jimbly, those remains would have gotten absolutely fucked up beyond belief. They never would have been preserved enough to be fossilized.
Vegetation would slowly grow back, and water would find its final resting places.
And Noah's family, and indeed all animal life, would interbreed until we became fucked beyond all recognition.
And those dinosaurs that were able to survive would be hunted to extinction.
Okay. That's new. I thought this documentary was leaning into the flood killed all the dinosaurs argument. Apparently no, they did survive the flood, and then human beings hunted them to extinction, like the quagga or atlas bears or something, but dinosaurs. They will never mention this again. I'm gonna need to consult an expert opinion real quick. So you're telling me that dinosaurs are actually really tasty?
Yep, and that's why they were hunted to extinction, okay?
Wow. Thanks, Doc. We really did learn a lot today. I like him so much better than the real one.
But legend would remember them as dragons.
Okay. We're doing that in the Ark documentary. The dragon thing. I'm not that surprised because the big answers in Genesis museums also assert this idea, because everything in the Bible has to be literally true. Dragons are real and refer to dinosaurs that lived alongside humans.
And so it was that on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark rested.
Oh, is that Is that all we're getting on that dragon thing? You can't just throw out a dragon teaser and then go, anyway, Noah and the gang landed the Ark. Is Jaren trying to make me buy the director's cut?
This group of 8 people would repopulate the Earth.
Okay, so I've done my best to look this up and try and make sense of this argument, and still I can really only find creationist blogs arguing this repopulation from Noah's family thing. All I can gather from it is that this concept relies on the idea that Noah's lot were more genetically pure. Because they were God's favourite lads, they had really top-notch genes, and they were less susceptible to problematic mutations? I don't really get it, but it feels like all the animals repopulating from literally 2 is a bigger problem, so, you know, like, whatever.
Just as legends around the world cite in their historical literature.
Like the legends that came before the Hebrew Bible? Yeah.
So there's absolutely no basis for saying that one group of people with a certain shade of brown skin are superior or inferior to some other people.
It's a shame it's towards the end of quite a long and boring documentary, but hooray for the inclusion of this brief moment of anti-racism. 10 points to the Ark and the Darkness. I think this is probably randomly included in here because claiming that the theory of evolution is racist is a big part of at least Answers in Genesis's shtick. Like, maybe they had a discussion about that and then cut most of it out, but thought, oh, we'll leave the anti-racist bit in because then we sound nice. I don't know. Oh god, no! It's the Tower of Babel.
But God came down and put a stop to their tower by dividing their once unified language into many languages.
Why would he do that? Why didn't he leave it at smashing the tower? He could have, like, sent down a plague or any of the other things that he did. Like, would that not have been message enough? The concept of God deliberately confusing languages just strikes me as so bizarre. I've never understood it as anything other than a culture attempting to understand why they're meeting people who speak in ways that they can't understand and creating a myth to explain it. God doing that on purpose, just very odd.
And dispersed into what would become the nations of the world.
Including the Dinosaur Nation! No, it's just that graphic from earlier. That's a damn shame. I thought we were going to get Dinosaur Country for a minute. Jaren explains that the linguist belief in a common ancestor language is impossible because at a certain point, we hit dead ends tracing back language origins. Unless you have faith in the Tower of Babel story. Or, the documentary does not add, if you acknowledge the fact that language does not leave any physical artifacts, which means we have very little evidence when we look back into the times before the invention of writing. God of the gaps.
Public schools now are teaching against the idea of marriage.
What just happened? We jump abruptly back into the world is cursed and sinful, so the end is surely coming once again. All fundamentalist creationist media has to include a big "the end is nigh" section. I think it's partly because their teachings rely on this concept, and partly because the fear of that end closely arriving is what drives their work and encourages people to donate to their ministries. It's the same thing Christians have been saying literally since Jesus' times. And you can bet that, assuming our species makes it this far, in another 1,000 years fundamentalists will be saying the exact same thing.
When's the Lord coming back? The Bible says that nobody knows.
When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. That's Matthew 10:23. Jesus came into Galilee proclaiming the gospel of God and saying, the time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God is at hand. Repent and believe in the gospel. Mark 1:14. Shortly thereafter, and he said to them, truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God after it has come with power. Mark 9:1. Yeah, the Bible doesn't give a specific timeline, but the stories about what Jesus said certainly imply that it was meant to be a significant while ago.
By virtue of telling us the future in advance.
That's right, 20 minutes before the end of this Great Flood Noah's Ark documentary, Ralph throws in a quick Bible prophecies came true section. Hell of a gamble.
Jeremiah the prophet predicted Israel would be conquered.
Ah yes, Jeremiah and his 70 years. Jeremiah predicted that Jerusalem would be destroyed and the Jews sent into exile. They would then return and rebuild the temple 70 years later. Guess what? Jerusalem fell in 587 BC and the Jews returned in 538 BC. 49 years later. We're still pretty close.
Then there's Isaiah, who wrote that Babylon's gates would open for Cyrus.
Isaiah, good, very good. Well, as with a lot of our ancient texts, the only extant copy we have comes from a much later period than Cyrus's reign. Most scholars consider the book of Isaiah to be an anthology. The first part written around 700 BCE containing the words of Isaiah himself, and then second Isaiah written by an anonymous source many years later. It's that section that the prophecy falls into. There's a reasonable amount of evidence that large parts of Isaiah were written after Cyrus's rule, and no evidence to the contrary.
And then there's the famous prophecy of Daniel.
Ah, Daniel. We've done Daniel before. Daniel's 70-week prophecy relies on the idea that the book was written in the 6th century BC. We know now that it was actually written in the first half of the 2nd century BC. It also contains historical errors that a person alive at the time of writing just wouldn't have made.
There are other prophecies, much like Daniel's, that also tell us the timeline of the Messiah.
This notion is fraught with peril. We could do a whole video on Jesus' birth. Hey, maybe I will at some point. I'll sum it up as quickly as possible. The Gospels, written after Jesus' life by people who were not eyewitnesses to the events they're writing about, bend the narrative in ways that we know are ahistorical in order to fulfill prophecy. For example, the census that Luke describes doesn't match the timeline properly. Mary and Joseph were from Nazareth, so a story had to be concocted that placed Jesus' birth in Bethlehem. These are theologically driven accounts written, designed to fulfill prophecy from the Hebrew Bible. They have no basis in historical evidence, and most scholars who argue for a historical Jesus believe he was born in Nazareth. So this prophecy fulfillment, just like many others, is just more Bible proves Bible.
Jesus warned us that in the last days, the time we are now on the threshold of, there would come a false Messiah.
This was after he said he'd be back in his followers' lifetimes, or?
Scripture refers to this false Messiah as the Antichrist.
Oh, go on then, give us a hint. Is it Taylor Swift?
With many recognizing that the plagues, famines, wars, hyperinflation, lawlessness, and acts of nature prophesied of in the Bible are appearing to be orchestrated by design.
Well, no, but the Antichrist is meant to be heading that infrastructure, right? The world of the Antichrist doesn't just pop up without him involved. Side note, I love this screen that just says AI. End of days, time of Satan, so on and so on. A time that, once again, has been nigh for 2,000 years.
God, in his wisdom and mercy, has given us a simple and easy way to be justified in his sight, and that is through his Son, Jesus Christ.
Hooray! What does this have to do with the Ark again? Oh, I see. The first hour and 40 minutes of the documentary are the Ark. The rushed little bit at the end is the darkness. I just thought they'd play Love Is Only a Feeling over the end credits. This part is just a rapid-fire chat about sin again and how Jesus saved everyone and forgiveness, etc. The only really notable thing is this shot of what looks like a wizard opening the tomb. What's going on here? We end with a Bible quote and then it's roll credits time. The final credit, of course, goes to the G-Man. Not that G-Man. That one. To quote a popular Catherine Tate character, what a load of old shit. It's nonsense theories that only exist because the people in this documentary have to justify their theory that the Earth is 6,000 years old. And then, therefore, because they are so solid in their understanding of the world as young, to them it seems obvious that these theories are way more plausible than evolution and, you know, anything that takes millions of years to explain, because the Earth hasn't been around for millions of years. And so they sit there and sort of laugh and pander to an audience that just agrees with them without actually looking any deeper into these topics by saying, haha, evolutionists, scientists, mainstream media, education, they're all bad and stupid and scary. Like, we know the obvious truth. Fundamentally, the only interesting thing about this, for me, is that this is a largely crowd-funded project that is also produced by a tax-exempt church ministry. That is what makes the depth of misinformation, the manipulation of facts, the choosing not to include the impossible parts of your theory, that's what makes it particularly dark, in my opinion. It's that and the anti-science propaganda, right? It is so anti-mainstream science, anti-mainstream schooling. My hope, and why I don't feel too concerned about this, is that the majority of the audience watching this will already have those views and already agree with everything that's being said. And so hopefully there's not going to be really an outside audience that might be swayed into pulling their children out of school and, you know, taking up a big anti-science stance and stuff like that. That's my hope, I guess. Let me know what you thought down below. Especially if you're a scientist, especially if you're a Christian, but also if you're just a silly little guy. What a crazy time. At least we got to see Tim and some dinosaurs. Two of my favourite things to see in a documentary. Do give this video a like if you liked it. This kind of video takes a lot more work than my usual content, so if you liked it, make sure you let me know by giving it a like, sharing it around, subscribe if you haven't already. Check out the playlist of movie and documentary reviews. If you enjoyed this, there are plenty more to satisfy your needs. Said that in a weird way. If you want to hear more from me, you can follow me at Emma Thorne Backstage for more lifestyle-y, casual, chatty stuff where I open my PO Box mail and do other weird things. Not that weird. Just like just a bit weirder than this. If you like video games or you just like listening to my voice, do check out Little Duck Gaming. I post over there the most frequently, so it's the best place to just hear me being silly. You can become a channel member for comment priority and some silly little emotes. The best way to support this channel is via the Patreon. With that, I must give a big thank you and a shout out to my giant chickens and colossal quackers over on Patreon. Especially Conla.
Gosh damn it, Conla.
Most importantly, have yourself a very lovely week, and I will see you really soon.